Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, a podcast about soundtracks, music, and movies. Each episode features a guest and focuses on a specific soundtrack and the personal stories connected to it. Now here's your host, Ryan Pack.
This is Soundtrack Your Life. I'm Ryan Pack, and this is a soundtrack podcast where I talk to someone about a soundtrack that they have a connection to. Today we have a couple of returning guests. We have our musical composer and member of Rubber Spaniel, Phil Bertulfo, and J.M. Brandt, writer of the upcoming comic Swamp Dogs, House of Crows, which should be out around Halloween time. Today we're going to talk about the 1997 Wes Craven film Scream 2. So, which one of you guys has a connection to this movie?
Well, I am the Soundtrack Your Life resident horror person, so I guess it'd be me. No, actually, I didn't watch this one in the theater, which is kind of strange. Yeah, I know, right?
Huh.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I just was out on the Scream franchise after the first one, and I watched it at home, I'd say maybe like 2 years after it came out. 2 or 3 years, but yeah, it was a lot of fun to revisit for the soundtrack and for the podcast.
I'm pretty sure I saw it in theater. I assumed I saw it with you, JM, because did we see the first one together?
We did.
Okay, I remember that because I remember. I think basically every time you have had a horror movie, I've had very little interest. And then I see it, and then it's like, this was the greatest thing I've ever seen. And I remember that one being a big one because I was like just not all that interested in this movie with like the Party of Five lady and like, it was like a lot of, didn't it? It seemed like there were a lot of, was it before or after American Pie?
Oh, that's a good question.
Scream 1 was before, I believe.
When was American Pie? Like 2 years? Like 98?
I'm on it. It is 99.
The thing that struck me
after both.
I hadn't seen Scream, either of the Screams since they were in theater, or either the first two Screams since they were in theater, and it's like the most 90s damn thing I've seen in a long time.
It is really 90s.
It's so 90s, and that's kind of saying a lot. Like my wife and I. During lockdown had kind of like a 90s-ish like binge thing going on. Like it kind of started with the Michael Jordan documentary. We just like were like, oh man, the 90s, remember the 90s? And then we like watched then there was like the Fresh Prince reunion. We watched like so much Fresh Prince.
And by the end you were wearing cross colors.
Well, it's just shocking to see how way more 90s Scream felt than like these like this documentary about the 90s.
Yeah,
but just watching, just like just seeing Matthew Lillard be
be not Shaggy,
but kind of be Shaggy.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the first movie, because I rewatched that one to sort of like prepare myself for Scream 2. It was really jarring to see him and just to see how 90s everything was, but also how absurdly obnoxious Matthew Lillard was.
He was like way over the top. They kind of all were, but then like a lot of them were TV actors, and I feel like that was like a kind of a good move.
Yeah,
because the movies, because it's like kind of like cheesy horror, but like it's smart to use these. I mean, I don't know if you've seen TV from the 90s, but the acting, it's just so weird how different the acting is from 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's because they had just invented talkies, and so
it almost feels that way.
Yeah, it really
like
does.
People, when you watch an especially hacky sitcom from back then, it just seems like no one, even in hacky sitcoms now, no one talks like that. Or like maybe on Nickelodeon or something.
Right. There's a cadence to it all. that there's like a tone and pacing to the patter that kind of doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and is inappropriate in a movie. But like,
Yeah.
but then you see it, but where it totally works in Scream. Like, just like Jamie Kennedy is already too much.
Yeah.
But like, in the amount of it that he's in the movie, in either of the movies, I think it's just like the exact amount of Jamie Kennedy that anything needs.
You hit Jamie Kennedy terminal velocity.
Yeah,
Is what you're
like,
saying?
and they kill him right when he's done being
Spoiler
useful.
alert.
Oh, come on, it's from
Yeah,
It's almost 25 years old.
yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So speaking of 90s, the soundtrack for Scream 2 is very, very 90s.
It's extremely 90s. I think
Yeah.
that's the most notable thing about it. What's like, I was looking at it and thinking like it's covering so many genres that were like and like everyone on it, almost every name on it is like was at or near the height of their relevance.
Yeah, more or less. You know what it like when you first asked us, Ryan, to do Scream 2 and do the soundtrack, the first thing I did was I looked at the soundtrack, and the second thing I did was I rolled my eyes. But
Yeah.
but the third thing that I did was question whether or not this was a label rep from whatever publisher put out the soundtrack. I'm guessing it's like Warner or something.
Capitol Records.
Capitol Records. Okay, like the Capitol Records representative, like their label rep was just like, let's give him the poo-poo platter, Wes Craven of our stars, and let them all shine. And they may have nothing to do with the movie, and they may have nothing to do with like the characters that are in the movie or the kinds of people that are in the movie, but we're just going to hit like every single genre with every single big act that we want to promote, even if it doesn't work with the movie.
Yeah, and I think they kind of like did the movie the same way. Like Sarah Michelle Gellar's in it kind of for no reason, or the whole thing just feels like as thrown together as the soundtrack. And like Laurie Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I saw it in theater, I was just like, why is the lady from Roseanne in this movie? And just being a little just like thrown off by that. And then there's a lot of people who are really famous now that I don't know that they were famous back then, like
Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah.
Timothy Olyphant, yeah.
Yeah, and Portia de Rossi.
Portia de Rossi, yeah. It's and in a weird way, the soundtrack kind of mirrors that. Like there's still some bands on there that are still like Foo Fighters is on there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a weird Foo Fighters song. Like
yeah,
it's a ballad.
all of these songs are like clearly like, they weren't even supposed to be B-sides. These were just like cutting room floor for all of the,
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of the Nick Cave song, because that came from the first movie. Used it also, and I think that's kind of like the Scream song.
Huh.
Yeah, I believe Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds shows up in the first 3 Scream movies in different variations.
Huh. Yeah, and it definitely was a different version and everything. Yeah, no, I would agree with the whole B-side or worse.
Yeah.
and not that they're all bad songs. There are some decent songs on there, but yeah, clearly these were not A level. They were saving these songs for some other teen comedy or something.
Yeah.
So the music supervisor for this movie and for the rest of the Scream movies going forward is a man named Ed Gerard. And he's the one that put it together. And apparently, like, the use of R&B and hip-hop music in the film is to kind of like break a barrier in horror movies.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this movie had like a whopping 3 black people compared to the first one, which had only white people.
Yeah.
I don't know how reputable this blog is, but Mr. and Mrs. Halloween.com, they mentioned music supervisor Ed Gerard, and they said the horror genre is notorious for excluding the African American element. So Ed Gerard follows suit, introducing R&B, hip hop, and rap to the musical world of the franchise. I mean, no better way to introduce that music to the world than having a masterpiece song in 1997.
I thought you were going to say Kottonmouth Kings.
They were at the height of their relevance.
Yeah. For one movie, they were relevant. I don't want to go on a soapbox rant, but I did want to talk about race in horror movies and Scream, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think I just gave you a runway for it.
I think you did. So, yeah, like very clearly, like the whole point of Scream, the first, was that you had this famous slasher director in Wes Craven making an updated slasher that was pegged by many as cute and inventive and wry and clever because it used the conventions of horror and the conventions of slashers as a weapon inside the movie itself, right? Like that's the whole thing is like, oh, we watched all the horror movies so we know how not to get caught, and these are the rules to survive a horror movie. And it's clear that that was like the thread that they wanted to continue with the sequels and everything. And so of course it would make sense for race to be brought up at some point because it is such a whitewashed genre for the most part, especially slasher films. But what I found really interesting being a horror geek is that they open the movie kind of echoing Scream 1, where it's like Drew Barrymore is the Janet Leigh psycho type character, where she's such a big name that you assume she's going to be like a main character and then you kill her off right away. And then they open with Jada Pinkett's, I believe it was just Jada Pinkett back then, and then Omar Epps, and it's like, oh, okay, you're opening with two of the few black actors that a horror movie fan in 1997 could identify, and then you put them in this place where Jada has this like soapbox of her own that she goes on about black people in horror movies and why horror movies are so stupid because it's just a bunch of white girls, you know, running up the stairs when they should just be calling the police or getting away or something like that. And Kevin Williamson, the writer, I think was like trying to be real clever and cutesy with it, but the way that I read it is like, now looking back on it 25 years later, I kind of feel like it's problematic. And I don't know if you guys felt that way watching it.
I did, but I also feel like everything is from the 90s.
Touche.
You know, like a lot of things that felt like, oh man, like edgy and like post-racial almost from back then now just looks so clunky and embarrassing.
Yeah. No, that's true. But I mean, like this in particular, it was like, okay, Jada Pinkett's talking about why people in horror movies are dumb, and we're supposed to agree with that. And then she talks about like race and everything, and then she becomes the biggest racial stereotype of a black person in a movie.
Yeah, like
yelling at the theater and annoying other people. And so it's like, okay, why would you play into these bad stereotypes and make us hate Jada by virtue of the way that she's acting? Like, not only is she a lecturer, but then she's also obnoxious, and she's the one that says, oh, I don't like horror movies, and gets super scared by it and walks out of the theater in order to like calm herself down. And then you're supposed to feel this sort of release when she dies really dramatically on stage, like in front of the movie screen. But she just like became this like shrewish character, and then also just kind of also played into the genre trope of the black person dying first. It's like in other horror movies, if you're a black person, that's like a death sentence for a horror movie. And so Scream 2 did break some barriers racially in having a black person survive. Spoiler alert again. But they also fell directly into black people being the first to die as a trap.
Isn't she also introduced to D'Angelo covering Prince?
Yes. Yes.
Two names that you are very surprised in 2021 to see associated with this movie.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And also, it was like that D'Angelo song. There's something about the production of it where it just sounds like it's trying to be D'Angelo's other big hits. Like it's got the same sort of like bop to it in the background. I don't know if that means he just like apes Prince all the time, or if like he's trying to recapture some of his D'Angelo magic in the
I
cover.
think these were all recorded while they were, in the same sessions where they recorded their hits, and these just were the not hits that they recorded.
Yeah, I believe so. Like the Foo Fighters song, Dave Grohl, Pat Smear, and Nate Mendel are credited as writers. Pat Smear left right after The Color and the Shape was done.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't like them going back in the studio to record like a song for a movie.
This was like day 2 of tracking Color of in the Shape on a song they probably forgot like the rest.
Yeah,
the
like
rest of the session.
I've seen Foo Fighters many times. They've never been like, hey, let's break out that B-side from the Scream 2 soundtrack. Like they'll play that song from Orange County.
Right. Yeah, maybe Dave Grohl's missing like a whole corner of demographic with by not playing that. It's like, oh man, I only came to hear Dear Lover.
I actually bought the soundtrack in high school because I was trying to get every John Spencer Blues Explosion thing I could get my hands on, and then I didn't find out till after I got it that it was a Dr. John cover.
Yeah, I think so. Right?
And it's a song that's famous in a different movie.
Wait, what movie is it famous in?
Dazed and Confused.
Oh, yes.
It's when they go around town hitting mailboxes with the bat, and then the guy comes out with the gun.
Right. I totally forgot about that. That John Spencer song is like really funny because it's very obviously the only one recorded by an artist for the movie that actually watched the movie or knew anything about the movie. Because like the Master P song is called Scream, so you would assume that they wrote it because they're going to be in the movie Scream, right?
Yeah.
But then John Spencer has this like long exposition about like Nev Campbell and shit before the song actually starts, and it's like, oh yeah, like this guy actually knew that he would be in a soundtrack as opposed to like just having tape pulled out of a trash bin and put onto a soundtrack.
Yeah, let me reference the movie and then sing a song that I didn't write.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of covers, aren't there? Like the Less Than Jake song is a cover. Well, it's that I Think I Love You, but What Am I So Afraid Of?
Oh yeah.
It comes at like such a like it's. I have
Is that like Tom Jones, like originally a Tom Jones?
Yeah, I think so.
Tony Romeo.
Tony Romeo.
Okay.
Or Tony Romeo.
Okay. So the whole movie, right, and listening to the soundtrack multiple times, and I wrote down 4 notes, like 4 one-sentence notes, and that's it. And the first one is really jarring Less Than Jake cover for end credits. Because it's like the movie ends and it's like a kind of satisfying, kind of cheesy 90s horror movie ending for it's very cathartic, and then it blares with this like really bad third wave ska punk like Tony Romeo cover.
Well, this is 97. This is like the hot shit.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I don't know. It was so different than the tone of the end of the movie.
Yeah.
It kind of, it was almost like its own jump scare because it starts out so energetically.
They are one of 5 Capitol Records bands on this soundtrack.
Are you gonna have us guess which other ones there are?
No, I'll go into it. So I got the soundtrack because my sister was working at the label at the time, and she knew that I was into a lot of the bands. So the Kottonmouth Kings, John Spencer Blues Explosion via some Matador distribution thing.
Mm-hmm.
the Foo Fighters, Everclear, and Less Than Jake. Those are all, I can confirm, Capitol Records bands at the time.
Where was D'Angelo?
Not on Capitol
Not on
Records.
Capitol.
Making love to your
Looking at it,
woman.
I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm just surprised by how much ground it covers, just genre wise. It's all over the map.
It really
Yeah, it's weird because
is
if you go to
all over the map.
Scream 3, it's just like a bunch of like Creed.
Creed's on it.
I think Creed has multiple songs on the third volume.
I'm
like
looking. Oh my
Creed,
god!
Slipknot, Finger 11, System of a Down.
Oh
Oh
wow.
god! This is
Seven
like the
Dust,
new.
Godsmack.
Yeah, it's the new metal one. It's
It's the new
Incubus.
metal one.
It's
Wow.
oh my god! Oh, that sounds terrible. Thank you for not picking Scream 3.
Yeah. Well, at least two of us own the Scream 2 soundtrack.
Yeah, that's true. Like I would have figured the answer was 0, and now it's 66.6%.
Yeah, it's weird because Scream 1 has, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and like Moby's on there before Moby got super annoying. And it just seems like, I guess they didn't have the same budget, but it seemed like they were trying to like go with the vibe.
Yeah,
And then Scream 2 is like all over the place, and then Scream 3 is just like just aggro rock.
I think I read on Wikipedia about the Scream 2 soundtrack something like they were like trying to get all these. They were trying to have like a famous soundtrack, like the way that like
that's how it felt.
yeah, like I don't know the way that like like a Tarantino soundtrack, but like with new songs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I mean, it really does feel like it took off in the 90s. Like, yeah, granted, there were big, like, popular music soundtracks from the 80s, right? Like, you had your Breakfast Club or whatever. But it feels like the 90s really spawned that soundtrack as another way of making money for a movie kind of a thing. Where it was almost like a piece of merch that was marketed towards any younger person that was watching the movie, and it was full of popular music. And with the movie, it's like they barely played any of the songs. Like you would hear like 2 seconds of a song, and because it was all over the place, it didn't really have any sort of unified theme or vibe the way that the first one did, like you were mentioning, Ryan. So yeah, it felt like a cash grab.
What were some big like 90s soundtracks though, or like movie songs?
I think Romeo and Juliet's the big one.
Romeo and Juliet is the big one. Batman Forever was really big, right?
Well, what else was on that other than the Smashing Pumpkins song though?
No, you're thinking Batman and Robin.
I'm thinking Batman and Robin.
Yeah, no. Batman Forever was U2 and Seal's Kiss from a Rose.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Like, and somehow Sunny Day Real Estate is on it too. And the Flaming Lips.
Right, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, some weird fucking shit. And like every person my age that I know owns a copy of the Lost Highway soundtrack.
Yeah, huh?
Oh, that's a perfect drug.
It had a lot of stuff. That was a really good soundtrack. And then I know I own the Saint soundtrack. Virtually everybody I know owned the Trainspotting soundtrack.
No, Trainspotting. The Crow, I think, was pretty big.
The Crow,
that's right. Yeah.
Judgment Night.
Yeah. The perfect fusion of hip hop and metal. Biohazard with Onyx.
And Teenage Fan Club with De La Soul.
Oh, that's pretty good actually. I don't know the song, but I feel like that's a good pairing for them.
You know, when we end this podcast, I'm listening to the Judgment Night soundtrack. You know, one of the first reactions that I had to the Scream 2 soundtrack, because this isn't a podcast about Judgment Night as much as I want it to be.
A movie none of us have seen.
And a soundtrack none of us have really listened to. No, so like one of the things that the Scream 2 idea brought about in me, and I'm kind of shocked that it still existed and am a little bit ashamed of is it brought out like my teenage haterdom. Like I was a teenage hater.
Oh, I
And
was definitely a teenage hater, and I feel like Scream at first, the movie itself made me like almost feel that way.
uh-huh.
It took me a few minutes to warm up to it this time. Sorry, I interrupted you. What were you
Oh,
saying?
no. I mean, it's just like I said I rolled my eyes. It was like, oh, Sugar Ray, oh, Less Than Jake, even though I had a Less Than Jake CD. Collective Soul was like, Collective Soul to me was, and I'm sorry, Ryan, if you like Collective Soul, and I'm sorry, listeners, if you like Collective Soul, but that band to me was the pinnacle of,
Music.
yeah, the pinnacle of art. It was like the pinnacle of the major labels and record companies, like stripping clean the carcass of pure and hopeful and idealistic grunge, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense. Like when Kurt Cobain died, some of his brain splatter got onto a suit and then was processed into Collective Soul.
No, but at this point with Collective Soul, they had turned into total like adult contemporary, like easy listening music.
Yeah, like you could replace Collective Soul with like Goo Goo Dolls and Silverchair and 10 other bands, and just it's like mom rock. It's future mom rock. It's like,
I don't even like I don't even like Silverchair, but I am offended by you coupling Silverchair with those other bands.
oh, is that right? Are they too real for you?
I feel like they were actually important to Australians.
Well, it's a good thing nobody from Australia listens to this.
I don't think they ever
don't have
got
the
that
internet.
adult contemporary.
Yeah, that's true. They weren't they. I feel like they were just a little older than Hanson.
Yeah, they would have been like 25 at the time.
Okay.
Actually, probably not even 25. They were probably 21 when the soundtrack came out.
Wait, hold on. Was Hanson at the time adult contemporary?
No, I think they were just pop.
Yeah, I think they were
Pop,
called pop, or like the resurgence of bubblegum pop.
Huh.
Mike D's wife directed the Bop video.
Oh, that's right. She also directed like the Britney Spears movie, didn't she?
Yeah, but we're not touching Britney Spears right now. Free Britney. You know, when I first started Twitter, first joined Twitter. I didn't start Twitter. When I first joined Twitter.
When I first founded Twitter.
When I first joined Twitter, I was talking to like some friends, just like killing the workday. Let's talk some shit about like songs we hated from the 90s. And I put December by Collective Soul. And then Collective Soul started following me on Twitter. And then a bunch of their fans started following me on Twitter. And I basically closed my account because I was terrified.
And like none of them did anything to you. It's just like they were like menacing youths.
I think they thought that I was mentioning the song because I was a fan. But it wasn't like, I'm mentioning this song because I hate it.
Like, I better close down this account before they catch wise to the fact that I'm not a fan.
I was just like, this is weird. I really don't want Collective. I don't want them following me.
That's my favorite thing I've heard all week, I think, is that you had a Twitter account, but it got followed by too many Collective Soul fans. So you closed it.
You know what they call themselves, don't you? Soul heads. Sorry.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think I really like 90s one-hit wonders. Just the one songs. Like Flagpole Sitta. Come on. You guys know that song.
Yeah. Speaking of soundtracks, I think that movie or that song holds like the record for most soundtracks in one decade.
Oh, was it just in every soundtrack?
It feels like it was on every like you know how "Fortunate Son" by Creedence is on every soundtrack for a movie that's supposed to take place in the 60s.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Does that song mean the 90s to people?
Yeah, I think so.
Like the late 90s? Huh. It kind of does. It was definitely like at a time where I claimed to not listen to the radio, but I definitely knew that song, and I definitely did not buy that album.
One of my favorite music writers recently tweeted that Sex and Candy is the best Pavement song that he's ever heard.
That's another good one. Sex and Candy.
Yeah.
Popular by Not a Surf.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
They'll
very
kinda,
90s feeling.
I don't know. I feel like these were the kinds of songs that they were hoping would be on the Scream 2 soundtrack.
Like they were hoping that Eels would have a different Eels song.
Yeah.
Because I feel like every Eels song is what you're
that's from
talking
an album.
about.
That song is from an album.
Right. And it's also very good and reminded me that I should really give Eels a chance. Like I know that they're kind of this, everybody thinks that they're really underrated and unfairly lumped into 90s popular music, but that they're actually legit. You know, it's
they're legit. They just get really dark really fast.
I have no problem with dark. As evidenced
isn't
by my
Electroshock
Scream
Blues
fandom.
about how like half his family died while he was making the album?
Jesus.
That's interesting.
Or like I think like 2 people died and then another one got cancer, or maybe 2 people got cancer and one of them died. It's dark.
Interesting.
The opposite of dark would be Rivers by Sugar Ray.
Yeah, which also I think only appears in the credits. It's like I don't understand. What's the logic behind a song that you pick for a movie that only appears in the credits?
I mean, you have to have a credit song.
Well, yeah, exactly. But
usually that's coveted space.
What are you trying to evoke with that, though?
That's where My Heart Will Go On goes.
Yeah, I mean, with Any Hope, you're kind of wrapping up the whole thing. You're like putting a big bow on it.
Yeah, you're hoping that people love the movie so much that they're just going to stick around for the credits.
I feel like it worked a lot in the 80s. Like Breakfast Club.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how else are you going to end that movie?
With Rivers from Sugar Ray.
Which is apparently their tribute to Weezer.
It did, you know what? I did feel like that was a Weezer song, or like Rivers Cuomo Ghost wrote it or something. It feels very Weezer-esque.
Were they like LA band friends?
Sugar Ray's from Huntington Beach.
They could have been.
So they were anti-mask friends. Sorry.
I don't know if they were friends. I think they just liked Weezer's music, so they decided to write a Weezer song. I mean, Sugar Ray started out as a hardcore band.
Yeah, didn't they have like a video on Beavis and Butthead that was metal?
Oh, they're from Newport Beach, not Huntington Beach.
Same diff.
But originally playing heavier nu metal music style, they basically, I don't know what to call their music other than it sucks. But it definitely became like much poppier and much more easy listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went on a date with a cheerleader who was really into Sugar Ray.
I don't believe either of those things.
You know, Phil didn't either, so he accompanied me to that date. Because, yeah. In fact, a whole group of my friends didn't believe that I was going to go out with a cheerleader, and so...
Oh, yeah, because you met her online before that was a thing.
Yeah, before it was a thing.
Oh, I totally remember this. Yeah,
yeah, her name was
Samantha, and we all called her some 30-year-old Mantha.
Yeah.
we were all like 16, 17. Yeah, I mean, I think we just were like, you're meeting someone on the internet, and this was like 1997 or something. So we were like, this is going to go badly. So we're going to make sure that this man doesn't murder you. And then it was just like a nice lady.
Yeah.
I think we were just relieved that someone wasn't trying to molest our friend.
Yeah, I was kind of just shocked that she was who she said she was. I think I was expecting to be catfished, even though I didn't know catfishing existed back then. It was just like, oh, no cheerleader's going to want to go out with this hater, this teenage hater. But yeah, we wound up going to the Sam Goody record store at Universal City Walk and looking through a bunch of Sugar Ray albums.
What a date.
Wow.
While all your friends watched from like 20 feet away.
Were you guys in the store? I thought we had a bit of privacy once you guys
You
realized
probably did.
that
I remember. I kind of
legit.
just remember like meeting in nice and open in the public, like, probably right in front of the movie theater, or maybe
Something like that.
something like that. I don't really remember anything else, but being relieved that there was a not grown ass man.
Unlike when I pose as a cheerleader now.
Yeah, well now we're on the other side.
Right.
Where even were you meeting people online? There was no like Craigslist even then.
AOL chat rooms, baby.
AOL chat rooms.
ASL. That stands for age, sex, and location.
Oh.
Yeah. One listener will know what I'm talking about.
I was going to bring up The Score by Marco Beltrami.
Yeah, please do.
So he's scored all the Scream movies, but Scream 2 in particular has like a 3-minute piece of Danny Elfman's score.
Okay.
And, I've noticed in films they'll reference like a famous score at some point from someone else, but this seems like a guest spot from Danny Elfman, and I'm not used to composers like letting a different composer have like a guest spot.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Maybe it's like if you hire me, I promise I'll get you some Elfman. 3 minutes of Elfman.
But Elfman doesn't go on the score soundtrack.
He just randomly scored 3 minutes.
Yep.
I wonder what 3 minutes they were in, because I didn't notice it. I mean, there's only a couple of times where I even noticed like a scored soundtrack to the movie.
Yeah, most of the music I noticed was like from the OST.
Yeah, there's not a lot. I believe that it's 17 minutes if you were to buy the Scream 2 original score.
Wow, 3 of which are Elfman. That makes me wonder. It would be kind of funny to make a movie that was scored by like a bunch of different people.
Yeah,
and the set, John Williams and Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman and Mark Mothersbaugh like scored this movie. What the fuck is this movie?
But they didn't work together. They just all had their but 25 minutes
right.
of film.
And none of them were allowed to see the film to score it.
Or no one was allowed to hear what anyone else had done.
But like basically just hire composers like you would a pop musicians.
So you want Kottonmouth Kings to score your movie?
4 minutes of it.
I mean, they do that with movies, right? They have, what are they called? Sorry, but they'll get different directors to do like.
Like an anthology film.
Like an anthology
like
film,
an anthology
right?
film. Yeah.
So why not do an anthology score?
Score, yeah. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I mean, or do an anthology score for an anthology film. Like each director picks a composer.
Picks a composer.
I think we've stumbled onto something here.
I think we've stumbled onto something prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, absolutely unobtainable, but something that everybody would be into.
Oh, yeah. Because
our soundtrack composer or soundtrack supervisor here, Ed Gerard, outside of the Scream franchise, he's mostly known for the City I Love You movies. You know what I'm talking
New
about?
York, I Love You.
Yeah.
So like the first one was
Paris.
Yeah. So he didn't do Paris, but he did New York, and I didn't know there was any. I didn't know they made more than Paris and New York, but apparently there's going to be a
Biloxi. I love
there's going to be a New Orleans one.
Speaking
New
of
Orleans is in
Dr.
production.
John, it's going to be all Dr. John.
And Shanghai has also been announced.
Oh, okay.
Is he scoring all of these?
He's the supervisor.
Oh, who's he going to supervise? Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman
And
Mark
Kottonmouth
Mothersbaugh.
Kings. Yeah. So going back to Scream, did you either of you find it funny where the Kottonmouth Kings wound up?
Wait, where did they wind up?
Okay, so Jamie Kennedy, his character Randy, who, by the way, I just want to make mention that in the movie they made him look like a weird fucking Satanist for no good reason. Between his eyebrows and his facial hair, it was like a really, really bizarre decision that made him look really evil. I mean, I guess that was the point. Was the whole thing is like you don't know who the killer is. Like maybe it's him. Maybe it's
another
this
thing
weird Satanist.
Is that's not a thing that's common in horror or slasher, the like whodunit element?
It is and it isn't. Yeah, I would say overall it is. Like I'm trying to like rack my brain for slashers because I'm not a huge slasher person, despite being the resident horror advisor for this soundtrack podcast. Yeah, I would say whodunit is kind of the big thing with with slashers. But yeah, like it seems especially gimmicky in Scream. And I think part of it is because it's, at least in the first two movies, it's like two people each time. Whereas, like in most movies, in most slasher movies, it's one person. Then in the Scream movies, you have to figure out how the pieces fit together to accommodate two characters. So anyways, in the Jamie Kennedy death scene is when they use Kottonmouth Kings, and all that happens is he gets lured into a TV van and stabbed to death. But as he's being stabbed to death, to mask the sound, there's just these three youths with a boombox that walk by, blaring this like really horrible Kottonmouth King song, and then one of them has this really awkward spin move, like he's supposed to be a breakdancer, but they didn't have the room, the time, or like the talent for breakdancing in it. So he just does this like weird spin that nobody walking around listening to a song would do. But then again, nobody would be walking around with a ghetto blaster blaring.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in this movie that people would not do.
And that's the scariest part of the movie, dying to Kottonmouth Kings.
Kind of. Wait, and what are you talking about? There's a lot of things in this movie people wouldn't do.
Oh, I mean, well, it's a horror movie, right? So, like the whole like running up the stairs. I like specifically when Sarah Michelle Gellar started running up the stairs in like the sorority house.
There was a bicycle she could like ram down. Maybe she was like, oh, there's a random bike in the stairs, I can push that on them.
I her being in the movie to me is just very funny because it's clear that they were just like, let's have the famous lady in it and then let's just kill her, and let like all of the like there's so many plot holes with her. Like she was like the designated like sorority sister, because all the sorority sisters were the sober sister, but like it looked like all of the sorority and frat houses were like across the street from each other. So like, why does anyone need to be sober?
Well, in case one of them wanted to drive across the street.
Yeah, it all just seemed very.
Yeah, no, it was to get another name into the movie and kill off another name, and I do kind of like that there were two Janet Leighs in this movie.
Yeah,
you had Jada Pinkett and her, so it was kind of like a double fake out. But yeah, no, it seemed she felt very wedged into the plot.
Did Scream set off like kind of this teen horror, teen slasher thing in the 90s? Like,
yeah, Scream was the genesis of it,
right? Like, yeah, and then after it was like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and like,
Yeah.
Final Destination.
So many. Yeah, Scream was the genesis of it. Horror in mainstream cinema was like a dead thing, and Scream popularized it again.
How long had it been dead? Was it because there's just too many like Halloween sequels?
I think it's because there was just VHS. And so people realized that you could just put things directly to video, and the horror crowd was more like a rent at home, watch together sort of
Oh,
demographic.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, and so Scream brought out this like
Teens
desire
and
to
tweens.
communally watch it in a
Mhm.
theater.
Yeah.
Oh.
By the way, the 90s are known sort of collectively as like the wasteland decade of horror.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sort of uniformly recognized as being like the worst decade for horror. I mean, granted, there's some really good, amazing stuff to have come out of it, but Scream, despite its sort of like postmodern horror trappings, is kind of like the scapegoat for just touching off like the worst span of
Yeah.
like bad slashers.
Well, like it seems like the casting of these television teen soap stars seem to be like the way to draw people into seeing it more than it was about the horror.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It was more about, it was like a bottom line. They were like basically bottom lining these movies.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I feel like it's like a parallel conversation to what we've been saying about the soundtrack. Like like the Scream 2 soundtrack is indicative of what horror was like in the 90s.
Oh, you should see the I Know What You Did Last Summer soundtrack. It's got Kula Shaker on it.
Oh man.
It's got Toad the Wet Sprocket covering Hey Bulldog.
Oh my god.
And it's got Korn.
So Ryan, I have to ask, like, what prompted you to pick this movie out of all other possible horror movies for like spooky season? Was it just that it was the one horror soundtrack you had growing up?
Partly that, and I think Phil and I had talked about the John Spencer Blues Explosion song in passing.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, like, we should all get together and talk about a soundtrack.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for me, getting this soundtrack, it was just ticking off a box of, trying to get everything I could get my hands on of.
Obsessive.
Yeah. I mean, didn't you ever buy soundtracks or comps for the same reason for other bands?
As a completionist, no. Maybe because I recognized the band and thought that they were cool, or that it was like a grouping of bands that I really liked. Like I got the single soundtrack before I had seen the movie because there were a lot of really good Seattle lead bands on it.
Oh yeah, speaking of 90s soundtracks, that's probably the best one.
It's a really uniformly pretty good soundtrack, I think. I still have a real big soft spot for Lost Highway and The Saint, but that's just me.
Because I'll find people who don't like Pearl Jam who will say, I like the Pearl Jam songs in the single soundtrack.
How many people say that? That's like... That's
At least me and my friend.
Wow.
Wait, which Pearl Jam songs are on the single soundtrack?
State of Love and Trust.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, okay. No, I can see it then. And I don't even know song titles, and I know that one. So, yeah, all right.
Hey, you knew Flagpole Sitta.
I did know Flagpole Sitta. Anybody from the 90s knows Flagpole Sitta. I know like 12 song names.
You knew I Think I Love You.
Yes. Well, actually, I didn't know that it was called that. It's when I looked at the soundtrack listing and I saw I Think I Love You, I was like, I know a song that they say that in the song. And then it turned out to be that song. So it was like
That
sort of
happens
like
a lot with songs.
reverse engineering. Yeah, yes. Or at least like the thing that you think it should be called is the parenthetical title to the song.
Yeah.
It'll be called something else. It'll be called like Plaid Argyle, parentheses, I think I love you. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the song.
So, the last time we did a podcast episode, we did a movie that had kind of a odd soundtrack for a horror film.
Yes. Yes.
So I thought this would work kind of in the same way. And then especially by looking at the other versions of the Scream soundtracks, I was like, wow, this one really sticks out like a sore thumb.
Oh, what's the fourth one?
The fourth one, it's like the Sounds and Ida Maria and the Novocaines.
Oh.
I'm not really
Right. This was from like 2011.
familiar. Yeah, 2010
2010
or 2011. 2011, you were right. And the A in Scream was replaced with the 4.
Right. Brilliant.
But it seems more like, one, they didn't have the budget for like a big blockbuster soundtrack, but also it seems like they kind of went back to the like, let's just kind of stick with a genre.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, is our like blockbuster soundtracks of new music a thing anymore?
Black Panther.
Yeah. I would say
that was
yes.
a pretty big one. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, all the movies that I'm watching with like my kid have at least one or two big songs to them.
Although I would say I kind of don't count like kids movies because that like Disney like made that a thing in like the 90s where like there should be at least one really famous song per movie.
Yeah, but typically those were by the people that they had contributing to all the songs or most of the songs for the movie. And then it's like, and then make sure that one of them is a single.
Yeah.
But like, I'm thinking about like the Lego movie and there's that song Happy in it. And that song.
You mean Despicable Me?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I was thinking that Everything is Awesome song.
Oh, yeah.
I get all these like really, really overly pleasant, catchy earworm songs mixed up. But
Everything is Awesome, I think, was written by Lonely Island.
It's a Tegan and Sarah song featuring Lonely Island.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think Tegan and Sarah wrote it.
You think Lonely Island wrote it and then they just sang it?
Well, Lonely Island wrote their part.
I think Kottonmouth Kings wrote it. Like, nobody else knows what they're doing right now, right?
Yeah,
do
any of us know anything about Kottonmouth Kings?
I know that if a person said that they liked them, I knew to be wary of the person.
Yes. I am looking it up. Apparently they are still a band.
Wow.
I don't know how many of them are original members.
None. They're just 4 generations removed at this point. They're just keeping
they're from
alive.
Orange County, and that makes so much sense.
It makes so much sense. I imagine that they pick new Kottonmouth King members by virtue of like a ritual that gets passed down from generation to generation, and it involves bloodletting of some sort.
Can you agree that they incorporate elements of other genres, including psychedelic rock, reggae, dubstep, bluegrass, and jam band?
No comment.
Yeah, apparently they broke up in 2016 and reunited in 2017.
Were they at Woodstock 99?
Ooh, good question.
I don't think they were big enough to be at Woodstock 99.
Yeah, they peaked too early for that. But they're like of the same. The people that listen to Kottonmouth Kings were the people running around in the shit at Woodstock 99 and setting fire to everything.
The Kottonmouth Kings didn't play at Woodstock 99, but all their fans were there.
Yeah. The spirit of Kottonmouth Kings was alive and well at Woodstock 99.
Well, yeah, if their songs about suburban living is so hard, I feel like they're a shoo-in for Woodstock.
I was not expecting Kottonmouth Kings to be the main topic of the Scream 2 soundtrack conversation.
Yeah, well, you didn't fall in love with the breakdancer.
I think we just all very vividly remember ignoring everything about them.
Well, thank you, Phil and JM, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's always a pleasure to have you both. So Swamp Dog's House of Crows will be coming out around Halloween.
Yeah, thereabouts, yeah.
So look out for that, your local comic book store or your not local comic book store.
Yeah, if you have a hard time finding it, they are available at swampdogscomic.com. I don't know when this podcast drops, but we are taking pre-orders on the website for the issue. So you can get it straight from the creative team when it's released. And,
very cool.
Yeah.
You can check out Rubber Spaniel on Instagram or Spotify or any streaming service.
Yeah, we're all over the place. We have a mixtape on YouTube that's worth a listen and a watch.
If you have the internet, you can find them.
If you don't, then you're just screwed. You shouldn't even be listening to this.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you don't, how are you listening to this podcast?
I think some kid in New York sells them on the street for mix CDs.
Records them on tape.
Yeah.
Check out Soundtrack Your Life on Instagram at SoundtrackCast, on Twitter at Soundtrack_your. If you'd like to email us, soundtrackcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.